Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, inshallah, we will continue with our lesson, which is about non-modernism. So we were talking about modernism during the previous weeks. Today, we will talk about non-modernism, the 20s and the 30s. I think after that, actually, we will talk about the time after even the 20s and the 30s, which were related to modernism. Okay, so when did the modernist movement end? Of course, we can't say that any movement has completely ended and finished and disappeared from the world. Definitely, there are supporters here or there. But there are periods where this movement prevail or become very popular. And after that, in other times, it will become like with little influence on people, or not many people would actually write following the criteria of this movement. So the end of it is, they consider it after the Second World War, okay, between 1950s and 1960s. Okay. Now let's come to talk about successes and failures of modernism. Okay, where did it succeed? Now, modernism brought art out of the honored halls of museums and galleries and made it more accessible. So if you remember the Musée d'Art, okay, the museum in Belgium, which was full of the portraits and the paintings, okay, that only a small number of people would go to visit and see. Now, our poet took those pictures or he took the pictures or the images and the portraits and wrote about them. So he brought them to life. When something is put in the museum, it remains dead and away from the people. But when you bring it alive in poetry, you actually make it accessible for other people. So this is what modernism succeeded in. It made those actually the art in museums and galleries accessible for the people around the world. The second point is that it successfully broadened the vocabulary of art to include non-objective and conceptual art. Non-objective, it means subjective. So it could be a reference to the personal actually experience of people and their feelings and their reflections on those feelings. Now, early modernism successfully captured the feeling of hope and faith in technology. Of course, we didn't take an example, but there were some poems actually or writings about the hope and faith in technology and the new emerging world that it grew from. There was a sense that the establishment could be challenged through art and new forms of thought. New ideas about reality were not only investigated through art, but celebrated. Okay, so here the idea is that, just a minute please, I'll look. So the idea is that here modernism actually created new ideas. Okay, those ideas would help them via art challenge what existed in the society. Now let's come to the failures of non-modernism. Of course, modernism, we read for T.S. Eliot, we read The Wasteland, we read the Hollow Ashes, but or the Hollow Men, the Hollow Men. You would find that while you are reading, how difficult it could be to understand those writings. So this is actually part of the failures of the modernism. So let's come and read those failures. Okay, so the first failure with modernism is that modernism grew to alienate itself It talked about alienation. مظبوط، كانت تتكلم عن الاغتراب. لكن فعليا modernism created an alienation for itself also. While there was an initial openness, the increasingly formalized and rarefied theoreticism of modern art made it inaccessible to those not within the mechanisms of the art world. What does that mean? If you are not specialized in art, if you are not specialized in theology, if you are not specialized in cultural studies, it will be difficult for you to understand the poem. And that's what we saw with T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland. We saw how difficult it was to understand. It was acceptable for us to understand Brufrook, the love story of Brufrook, if you remember. But when it came to The Wasteland after that, and when it comes to the Hollow Men, you would find that it was like different from us. It's far away from us, and it is difficult for us to understand. So this is the idea that modernism grew to alienate itself. It separated itself from the common people and the people in general. The concept of art for art's sake is ultimately a conception of exclusion. When you write art for art's sake, it means that you have to be elaborate in your writing. You have to be elite, and your writing should be of excellent actually value. This excellent and difficult to understand complicated way of writing made it excluding the people. So that's why we consider it a conception of exclusion. Exclusion, it means that it will exclude people who are not involved in such studies. Its failure is that it became too personal and esoteric. And what do you mean by esoteric? Okay. So esoteric is intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest. So the poetry, the modernist poetry became esoteric. As we said, esoteric, it means that it is just devoted for a small number of specialized people, hence failing to communicate to a majority of its audience. So those audience who supported modernism, who admired modernism at the beginning, later they grew to become separated from it, excluded from it, and unable to understand the texts written according to the modernism criteria. Now modernism quickly lost the ideals and values that early modernists strove to realize. What are those ideals and values? Of course, they are related to society and to politics. Many early modernists strove to make political or societal commentary via their art. They wanted to make changes for the society and the politics. However, political and radical interpretations were suppressed. So they were deprived from that. They were prevented from trying to write about the politics. Okay, that's why suppressed يعني تم قمعهم many times by the state. طبعا الحكومة قمعتهم. So that the art was stripped of its meaning and discussed in terms of pure forms. فأصبح اللي بيكتبوه بلا معنى. وممكن تروحوا تقرأوا الشعر الحديث هتلاقوا انه مثلا بيوصف قاعد في الحديقة وفي قصيدة عن الكروسة ولونها والضوء اللي نازل عليها والدجاج اللي ماشي جنبها. فلما تيجي تحكي what is the theme, there is no theme. It's just art for the sake of art. So they were deprived from the ability to write about the political and social issues in their country. Hence, that actually made them lose their ideals. And if you don't have an ideal, so the people will just abandon you. Okay? Modernism has paved the way toward what some call the end of art. تخيلوا يعني it started strong and then it became complicated and then it was deprived from its early ideals. So this is actually a deterioration in the art level. كان في عنا انحدار في مستوى، أصبح في عنا انحدار في مستوى الأدب، وفي النهاية وصلنا لنهاية القيمة الأدبية للشعر. As Miles Mathis bluntly states, currently we have an absolute dumbing down of content and form in the name of political anti-elitism, so that artifacts are now intentionally indistinguishable from garbage. تخيلوا indistinguishable، ما بتفترق عن أو ما بتختلف عن garbage، القمامة، rubbish. إذا هو بيحكي لهم إنه إحنا اليوم dumbing down، عمالنا بنهبط هبوط حاد في الشعر. طبعا هنا إحنا بنتكلم عن سنوات الخمسينات والستينات وما بعد ذلك. وبيعتبر إنه أصبح فيه هبوط حاد في المستوى القصائد الشعرية، لأنه أصبحت غير قادرة لا على انتقاد المجتمع ولا على انتقاد السياسيين، فأصبحت مفرغة من محتواها، التركيز على أشياء يومية عادية ملهاش علاقة بأي تغيير أو محاولة تغيير أو تعديل في المجتمع زي ما شفنا في الحركات السابقة. Okay? But we still create an elite, yes, an elite simply by paying certain artists excessive sums for garbage. يبقى هو بيعتبر إنه الشعراء أصبحوا بينتجوا لنا شوية قمامة، والمشكلة إنه في بعض منهم إحنا بندفع لهم كتير مصاري لهالقمامة عشان نشتري منهم هذه القمامة. So you would find that modernism failed actually at the end to catch up and to keep up to its own standards and ideals, and it deteriorated at the end. So it failed. Okay, now we will come to the new beginnings from 1955 to 1980, and here I will start with the new video. Okay, thank you.